You are listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 139. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how life with less alcohol is more fun than you think. I work with high achievers who struggle to drink a glass of wine without it turning into 2 bottles. I'm the one they call when they want to take it or leave it. So if you want to change your relationship with alcohol that doesn't involve counting days sober, you're in the right place. Hi everybody and welcome back to the podcast. I do hope you enjoyed last week's retrospective. I think this is very helpful sometimes just to really go back to basics and ask ourselves those questions that we may have answered before, but just actually even just to see how your answer may change over time. All right, so today we are talking about the wonderful topic of redefining failure. Now, I want to talk about this because failure is a common theme on the podcast, but today's emphasis is going to be on what we truly think about failure, right? Our real thoughts about it, because this determines everything about how we act, right? We talk about that a lot. How we think defines how we feel, which then determines how we act. And on the one hand, you might say, yeah, failure, I get it. I know it's not going to be perfect, that I need to fail, but that's one thing. But then how do we really feel about it? Kind of in the core of our souls, in the core of our being. And that's really what I want to explore today. So we're going to be talking about how you define failure, because failure, I want to offer, is not a fact, even though it's how we tend to view it. Failure is really our judgment, the judgment that we place on a fact. For instance, the fact might be, I didn't write a drink plan. We might think, I failed. A fact might be, I didn't complete the task by 5 p.m. And the thought might be, I failed. A fact might be, someone said, I need to buck up my ideas at work, right? That's what they say to you. It's a fact. And you might think, oh, I failed. A fact might be, I got divorced. The thought is, I failed. The fact might be, I drank 5 glasses of wine last night. And the thought might be, I failed. Now listen, failure is not a fact. The facts are the facts. If you drink 5 glasses of wine last night, that's a fact. If you had a drink planned for 4, that's a fact. And the difference between the two is that you drank 1 over. That's the fact, right? How we think about that makes all the difference. You might say, well, it's a failure because I didn't achieve the plan. But maybe you can think, actually, I didn't know that I was able to get so close to achieving my goal. Or maybe you're thinking, actually, if I'd have thought about it in a different way, I might have planned something differently. We can have all these different thoughts about it, right? But facts are facts. Failure is always a thought, which means that thinking you failed is optional. Instead, you can always just choose to believe you are either winning or learning. Now, it doesn't end there. In order to always be winning or learning, right? Because I don't want you to say, well, I didn't reach the goal, I guess I'm going to learn. And then you kind of move on to the next thing in your life. There is kind of like a price to pay. It's like an entrance fee into being able to turn failure into learning. In order to always be winning or learning, you have to actually learn, right? From the action that you take. How do you do that? By evaluating. And you do this by mining your missteps and mistakes for all the intel you need in order to course correct and move forward. Now, to do this, you always want to be assessing 3 simple things. And you can just do this at the end of, you can do this in the morning for the night before. You can do this for your day. I do this all over. There are 3 simple questions: what worked, what didn't work, and what you will do differently. But then, my friend, you need to implement the change you have decided to make, right? At least one of the things you've decided to do differently. And make sure you actually follow through doing that thing. Now, I will offer up here that this is where I routinely fall down, right? So I'll do my eval. I'll see the 3 or 4 things I think I could do differently. And then I will say that I do not always follow through. In fact, how it shows up for me is there are times when I'll come up with something I need to do differently. And then I will start to notice that that same thing appears time and time again. And I see this so clearly, by the way, because I do actually evaluate every single day. Now, one of these, I'm going to give you an example of this. So one of these, and this is to do with my business, I'm going to give a drinking example in a minute, is the thing I need to do differently is I need to allocate specific times to specific tasks and achieve that, right? So if I'm going to write a podcast, it's going to take me an hour. Let's say that I sit down, I take an hour to do it, and then I'm done, rather than just say I'm going to do a podcast and then, either forget or not choose, let's say, to put a time to it. Right? So this is just something I really want. I've just chosen as a personal development goal. So this is one of the ones that I see coming up frequently on the what I would do differently, right? Because I have the best of intentions, and then for whatever reason it doesn't happen, I forget or whatever. When I notice this, and I see this maybe if it's 2 or 3 days running, the one thing I do is I get curious. I do not go into, oh, there you go again, you just never learn, screw up, failure. I get curious. I focus not just on the result I want to create, which in this case is a calendar with tasks assigned for specific amounts of time that I follow through on, but I also focus on the process, the how I get there, because that's all about how I am showing up. So first I ask, what emotion am I feeling when I think about having to assign times and to do the tasks for sure in those times that I have pre-decided to be on my calendar? The feeling that normally comes up for me there is a sense of being a bit scared. Am I going to be able to do it? Because a lot of the things I'm doing, for the first time, so I really don't know how long they're going to take, but I don't accept that as an excuse. I still have to decide a time. I also feel constrained and constricted, and how this shows up for me is my chest tightens, right? And this doesn't feel good. And when we're feeling this way, this is why we end up not following through, right? Because then I'll go off and do something else. I'm a past master at productive procrastination, I call it. So I'll do anything but the thing that I really wanted to do. All right. So when I see that happening, I ask why, right? And why am I feeling the fear? Why am I feeling constrained and constricted? And an answer might be, it's because I'm afraid it's going to be hard, right? And I don't know enough. And because this is something that I've struggled with for years. I'm going to have a lot of evidence for this for years. And I just probably don't believe it's going to get any easy anytime soon. So really, that's not the sort of thing I want to go towards. All right. This is useful. Even though this looks catastrophic, it's very useful. It is valuable intel that tells me how I can start moving forward. The next thing I ask myself is, what feeling am I seeking? Or what feeling would have me taking action, right? So I kind of sit with the fact that I'm feeling scared, constrained, and constricted. I'm not going to choose that as being a problem. What feeling would have me taking action? I often come up with the idea of competence. If I see myself as competent, which I do in the round, right? So if I can see myself as being competent to figure out this task, I know I'm actually going to put my best foot forward and I'm going to do it, right? Which is where I'm working to the limit I've set for my tasks. I'm just going to do it because I'm feeling competent at my ability to do it. And then if I sometimes get it wrong, I will be in learning mode, right? Because I'm taking action, because I know to be competent, you have to be bad at something, willing to be bad at something before you can be good at it. And I'm not hiding myself from the process of doing it, right? The actual doing it. I also know that if I carry on doing the process, carry on taking action, putting myself into the feeling of feeling competent, it is inevitable I will get to the point where I just do this thing as habit. I might not like it, but I won't fight it. That's very different from being so afraid of not getting it right that I just don't even try. And that is what I saw so often back in my drinking days, and what I see day in, day out with my clients. For instance, they might be choosing to do an alcohol-free day. Or maybe they're going out with friends and are going to turn down the wine they've decided, right? And that's just kind of what in their plan. But what happens is we build it up. They build it up in their head as this big, big, big thing, right? And the focus is all on the result and getting the result, right? And so when it's this binary thing, you either get the result or you fail. No wonder it feels really heavy. And the really interesting thing is when you're thinking in this way, what can happen is even if things go right, we don't tend to take ownership for it. Might see it as a fluke and certainly not something we really believe we did. So we aren't going to be readily willing to do it again anytime soon. Thank you very much. Right, I did the alcohol-free day. Woo! It was made easier because it wasn't so sunny and I'm so triggered by the sun and I managed it. But then when I say, so how about doing it in a couple of days' time? It's like, oh, no, I only managed it because of that, still going to, right? We still have all these thoughts and fears and insecurities. So let's now do an exercise. I want to just step through the learning, how we learn to love the process and how those questions I ask of myself and my business that I just ran through. I'm going to run through this with you now. And please follow along with this. And you can pause the podcast if you're able to, and ask yourself these questions too. So I want you to think of a result you want to create. It might just be that I managed to, not get drunk tonight or just be alcohol free or whatever it is. First, I want you to ask yourself, what emotion are you feeling when you think about the result that you want to create? So for instance, maybe your first alcohol free day in years. All right. I want you to notice what feelings come up. Notice how they feel in your body. Is there any tightness? Is there any palpitations? Is there any shallow breathing? Right? Then I want you to ask, why is that coming up? Maybe like me, you immediately go to thoughts of, well, because I'm afraid, because I think it's going to be hard. I don't know enough. This is something I've struggled with for years. I'm not going to enjoy it. That was a big one that kept me from taking action. This is going to be really awful. Can you imagine an evening out without alcohol? Who would choose that? That's kind of a freakish thing to want. Even if I manage it, it's going to be awful, right? So list out all those things. And remember, we're not judging ourselves here. This is just valuable intelligence. We're seeing what's going on in our brain, which remember is the engine that's driving the ship here. Now I want you to ask what feeling you are seeking. What feeling would you have you taking action, right, in order to maybe go and have that first alcohol-free day in years? I came up with me for the one of competence. It could be different for you. I want you to put yourself into that feeling that emotion. So think of something maybe else in your life where you didn't think you could do it, but you did. And then how did you motor through that, right? If you just think of something that is powerful for you. And then when you feel that emotion in your body, decide what kind of action that would have you taking. Now remember, as you do this, I want you to be open to the process of doing this. The process of going through the evening with the alcohol-free plan and of handling everything that comes up, right? So you can get to the point that if you carry on doing the process, right, it is inevitable you will get to the point where I just do this thing now, right? You might still, and you can use this with areas in your life where you might still not really ever enjoy it, but you can do it, right? You're not going to be holding yourself back from doing the thing. This is very, very different from being so afraid of not getting it right or not achieving the result or not liking it or all those judgments that you just don't even try. This way you kind of fold failure into the process just like you would fold flour into a cake, right? Gently and carefully. The first step of making a sponge cake is to vigorously beat the sugar and the butter together, but when it comes to the flour, it is always gentle because you want to preserve all the air. Right, there's this very careful process. I remember my mum taught me, with this particular spoon. So it's not what you do, but how you do it. Right, how you do it means everything. It's not whether you say no to the drink or not, but how you do it that matters more, how you feel as you do it. Because that will determine if you're going to be willing to carry on doing this or not. So as I've stepped through this, if being hard on yourself or feeling bad because you're scared that you're going to screw up again is something you suffer with, I really encourage you to redefine failure. Look at your current definition. Ask, is it serving you? Maybe it's too broad or too all-encompassing. For instance, if you're wanting a whole evening to go off perfectly, that might be a little bit too much, at least to start with. Maybe just start with breaking the evening down into particular chunks. Can you handle the first part in a way that you want to, right? Can you set yourself a mini goal for the first part of the evening? Can you get to the default that I always recommend, by the way, of ordering an alcohol-free drink first? You don't even have to drink it, but just to order that first, it's kind of a way to buy yourself some time, especially if you're feeling overly excited at the idea of having drinks on your plan. And it's just good policy to order an AF drink first in case you actually are thirsty. So, is your definition of failure too broad or all-encompassing? Also, does your current definition of failure include things that are outside of your control? Does it include doing things a little less than perfect? For instance, if you accept a drink that wasn't in your plan, but you only end up drinking half of it because you managed to remember and interrupt the pattern and stop, how would you view that? Is that a fail? Is that a win? Right? Is it a learning? How do you want to think about that? It's totally up to you. And remember, how you think about it determines how you'll act next time. What would be different about your life if you chose the most narrow definition possible of failure? What would be different about your life if you believed you couldn't ever fail at all? No, this is not some namby-pamby way of looking at failure in the sense where there are no, and everyone's a winner, right? And everyone gets a medal for participation. It doesn't matter really what you put in. No, I'm not saying that. But if you can redefine failure in your mind so that you're still willing to keep going forward, imagine what that means for you and your goals. It's such a different energy, and that is crucial, and you can start it right now. I mean, right now, the minute you listen to this podcast. I'll leave you with a thought that I have written out by hand on a piece of paper that I keep in my desk drawer. And it is as follows. Because I have a plan, and because I know I'll stay committed to it, by the end of the duration, I know that I will have achieved that goal. Now, you will see this statement is all about the process. It's about how I show up. It's how I keep going and how I talk to myself throughout. That makes all the difference. And I believe this starts with redefining how we each see failure. Here's what I want to leave you with. You are wildly, infinitely capable. And I will hold you to that vision even when you can't hold yourself to it, because that is the entire point of coaching. Every single one of you listening right now is somebody that I believe in. If what I talk about here on the podcast resonates, but you don't know where to start, or you're scared, or maybe you're scared of failing, I can help. I want you to go to 90dayslater.co and click on book a call to chat with me. And if you're thinking, oh, Anna, but nothing will make any difference, where you and drinking are concerned, it doesn't matter how you redefine failure, you're not going to get your goals. Well, of course you feel that way. Of course you believe that. You haven't achieved your goal yet. So of course it's going to feel impossible. But just imagine if you could absolutely deploy this win or learn strategy to failure, right? So you can show up in a way that makes yourself proud. Just imagine what kind of action you would be willing to take, and just imagine what's possible. And with me alongside, you will not be lonely, and that makes all the difference. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week.